The moment Sarah Ferguson's words hit the airwaves, something shifted. It wasn't what she said that caught everyone off guard, it was what happened next. Or rather, what didn't. Prince Andrew said nothing. No statement. No clarification. No denial. Just silence. And in a family where silence is often strategy, his felt heavier than usual. Because this wasn't a garden-variety royal soundbite. This was Fergie, the Duchess of York, hinting at something deeper. About loyalty. About truth. About the price of standing beside a man the world had already judged. Her interview wasn't a defense. It wasn't an attack. It was a window. And through that window, millions peered in, hoping, maybe even expecting, that Prince Andrew would follow through with his side. But he didn't. Instead, he vanished into the background once again. No cameras. No interviews. No rebuttal. And suddenly, the silence was deafening. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Was it the palace's hand pulling the strings? Whatever it was, one thing became clear. Prince Andrew's silence wasn't emptiness. It was loud. And what it revealed, without a single word, may say more about him, the royal family, and the fractures still hiding behind palace walls than any prepared statement ever could. Because when the Duchess speaks, and the Duke vanishes, the question becomes not just what was said, but why he didn't say anything at all. Once, he was Air Miles Andy, the royal playboy, a naval war hero, the Queen's favorite son. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, was born into power, and for decades he wore it with an easy arrogance. He had charm, swagger, access, and yet, something else always lingered beneath the surface. An unease, a restlessness, a sense that he never quite grasped the weight of what being a royal truly meant. But for a while, it didn't matter. The public smiled. The press swooned. He married Sarah Ferguson in 1986. Their wedding drew nearly 500 million viewers worldwide. They were electric. The red-haired rebel and the Queen's cheeky son. For a moment, they looked like the future. Then the cracks appeared. Affairs. Tabloid scandals. Distance. Emotional. Physical. Royal. By 1992, the fairy tale unraveled. They divorced. She was cast out. He stayed in. But they never really separated. In the years that followed, Sarah and Andrew remained unusually close. They raised their daughters together. They shared a home. They defended each other, even when no one else would. And when the Epstein scandal exploded, that bond was tested like never before. Andrew's image collapsed. His infamous BBC interview became the subject of global ridicule. His royal duties were stripped. His honors returned. The public saw disgrace. But Fergie saw something else. She stood by him. Not blindly, but fiercely. And when she spoke in that recent interview, cautiously but unmistakably, she spoke as someone who had seen everything. And maybe that's why Andrew's silence cut so deep. Because for once, the woman who was always silenced, the outsider, was the one making noise. And the man who always had a spotlight had nothing left to say. The royal family has an unwritten rule, maybe its most sacred one. Never explain. Never complain. It's the code that's kept palaces insulated for centuries. A fortress of silence. A shield of ambiguity. But Sarah Ferguson never followed rules very well. And this time, she broke the quiet code with purpose. In a recent sit-down interview, Fergie opened a door that had long been bolted shut. The interviewer asked a seemingly gentle question about family, forgiveness, and legacy. But her answer wasn't gentle. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. She spoke of men who fall from grace, of loyalty that sometimes looks like blindness, and of the burden of standing by someone when the world wants you to walk away. It wasn't a confession. It was a message. And the subtext rang loud. She still sees Prince Andrew. She still knows the man behind the scandal. But she's no longer pretending everything's fine. For years, Fergie played the loyal ex-wife, smiling at garden parties, speaking softly about Andrew's heart, his sense of duty. But this interview was different. There was weariness in her voice. a hint of anger, and something else, something rare for someone in her position. Clarity. She wasn't attacking Andrew. She was stepping away from his silence. Maybe even asking him, indirectly, to finally speak for himself. And that, royal insiders say, sent ripples through the palace. Because when Sarah Ferguson speaks, people listen. She's lived the scandal. She's worn the exile. She knows what it costs. And for her to speak now, when Andrew remains silent, isn't just revealing. It's revolutionary. There are many ways to answer a question. Words, gestures, defiance. And then, there's silence. Prince Andrew chose the last one. Following Sarah Ferguson's veiled remarks, speculation swirled across every tabloid, headline, and royal commentator feed. Would Andrew respond? Would he issue a statement? Would he stand beside her, or step away? But the Duke of York did what he's done best since his public downfall. He disappeared. No interviews. No palace briefings. Not even a cryptic press release through back channels. And in that vacuum, his silence became its own kind of voice. A voice that said, "I'm not defending myself anymore. Or worse, I have nothing left to defend." Because in the world of royalty, silence is rarely emptiness. It's strategy. It's damage control. It's fear. And in Andrew's case, it's become a pattern. Ever since the catastrophic BBC Newsnight interview, when he tried and failed to explain his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, silence has been his refuge. He was told to step back. He complied. He was asked to settle legal matters quietly. He did. And now, when his most loyal defender, the woman who once risked her status to stay by his side, speaks candidly about standing by someone the world turned on, Andrew says nothing. And that silence, it stings. Because silence, in this case, doesn't just protect him. It isolates him. It reveals a man so cornered, so strategically muzzled, or so unsure of what's safe to say, that the safest move is saying nothing at all. But in doing so, Prince Andrew may have finally lost the last thing he still had: public sympathy. Because when even Sarah Ferguson dares to speak, and the man at the center stays mute, the world starts to wonder, what truth lies in the silence? Inside the palace, every scandal has a plan, a protocol, a containment strategy. But Prince Andrew shattered that blueprint. When the Epstein allegations surfaced, royal handlers scrambled. When the BBC interview aired, they panicked. And when Sarah Ferguson spoke, calmly but unmistakably, about the fallout, the palace's old crisis playbook finally fell apart. Because this wasn't a leak. This wasn't a rogue tabloid. This was Sarah, the woman who knew Andrew before the world turned on him, who stood beside him when almost no one else did. And when she broke the quiet code, it left the royal household exposed. Behind closed doors, sources say the mood is anxious. Not because Fergie lied, but because she didn't. She didn't even have to. Her tone said everything. She's tired of pretending. She's tired of defending. And perhaps, she's preparing for life beyond the shadow of Andrew's scandal. So now, the palace whispers have begun. Not about Andrew. They've known that silence is part of the deal. But about Sarah. What's she planning? Why now? Is she protecting herself, or finally letting go of him? Insiders suspect she warned the firm in advance. Out of courtesy. Out of loyalty. But the impact. It hit anyway. Because the truth is, Sarah's words reopened a wound the palace has spent years trying to bandage with silence. It reminded the public of the unanswered questions. The uncomfortable photos. The legal settlements. The disgrace. And with Andrew saying nothing, refusing even to nod toward accountability, Fergie's words now feel like a reckoning. Not just for him, but for everyone who tried to bury this story under royal rugs. Because damage control only works when everyone stays quiet. And Sarah Ferguson just made noise no one can ignore. For the House of York, legacy was once a birthright. Prince Andrew, the Queen's darling boy. Sarah Ferguson, the firebrand duchess who won hearts before falling from grace. Together, they were flawed, but fiercely loyal. And their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, were raised with one hope: to restore the name. But now, that name carries weight, the wrong kind. Because when you hear York today, you don't think of duty or dignity. You think of scandal, of lawsuits, of whispered settlements and awkward silences. And while the royal family tries to compartmentalize, Andrew exiled, his daughters spared, the stain remains. For Beatrice and Eugenie, that stain has become a shadow. They've tried to walk the line, uphold the values of the crown while standing by their father. But Sarah Ferguson's recent interview, and Andrew's suffocating silence, has reignited scrutiny not just on the Duke, but on the entire York legacy. How much longer can the family stay silent before it consumes the next generation? Because Beatrice and Eugenie want lives beyond the scandal. They've married, started families, taken on selective royal duties. But every photo, every event, every moment they step into the spotlight, they carry his name. And now, with their mother speaking out, gently peeling back layers of curated silence, the question becomes, what does York even mean anymore? Is it a duchy, a disgraced title, a cautionary tale, or can it still be salvaged? Sarah Ferguson seems to believe it can. That's why she spoke. Not just to defend, but perhaps to redefine. To signal that the York name doesn't belong solely to a man who lost the public's trust, but to a family that still believes in accountability, in resilience, in starting over. But for that to work, Andrew has to do something he's refused to do. Speak. Because until he does, every attempt to restore the York legacy remains chained to the silence he insists on keeping. When Sarah Ferguson's interview aired, the public didn't need subtitles. They understood. They heard the careful choice of words, the pauses, the tension in her voice. And they noticed the one thing louder than anything she said: Prince Andrew's silence. Social media lit up. Headlines dissected every sentence. Talk shows debated the motive. But the real focus wasn't Sarah. It was him. Where is Prince Andrew? Why hasn't he responded? Is silence a confession? Because in the age of instant access and curated apology videos, silence isn't neutral anymore. It feels evasive, calculated, even arrogant. Especially when the world remembers what's at stake. A friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, a settlement with Virginia Giuffre, and a royal title still technically intact. For the media, it's become a familiar pattern. Fergie speaks. Andrew retreats. And each time he stays quiet, his absence becomes the story. Even his defenders are losing patience. Because silence was one strategy, but now it feels like surrender. Or worse, contempt. Contempt for the public. For the truth. For the woman who stood by him, and now dares to speak alone. And yet, in that void, something else is happening. Sarah Ferguson is reclaiming her own voice. She's no longer the scandal-ridden ex. She's the survivor. The loyalist. The one who speaks, even when it costs her. And the more she speaks, the more the world starts to ask. If she has the courage to talk, why doesn't he? Because silence might protect Andrew from more headlines. But it doesn't protect his legacy. And every day he stays quiet, that silence grows heavier. In royal history, scandals fade. Wounds heal. Narratives shift. But some moments leave scars. And this was one of them. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Sarah Ferguson dared to speak, not to expose, but to reclaim. Her dignity. Her truth. Her version of loyalty. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't beg for headlines. She simply told the world, I stood by him. But I'm not blind. And the man she once loved, the father of her children, said nothing in return. That silence. It wasn't strength. It wasn't discretion. It was the final fracture. Because in that silence, we saw the end of something. The end of public faith. The end of the palace's protection. The end of the belief that Prince Andrew could ever step back into the light. But we also saw something else rise in its place. A woman once cast out, now commanding attention. Not through scandal, but through clarity. Sarah Ferguson's interview wasn't about revenge. It was about release. And in releasing her truth, She revealed his, without saying a word for him. Because sometimes, silence is just silence. And sometimes, it's the sound of everything falling apart. So the question remains. Will Prince Andrew ever speak? Or has the time for words already passed? What do you think Prince Andrew's silence really means? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into stories they'd rather keep behind palace walls.